And thanks very much for inviting us to speak today. It's been a while. We've been trying to arrange this, but I definitely wanted to have my colleague Sherrill join, and so today's our opportunity to share. So before we go any further, we'll formally introduce ourselves. So I'll hand it over to Sherrill first to introduce herself.
Winnabojo, Nidwe Monadok, Midway Kamagalgo Kwe Dijnikas, Namayando Dem, Anishinaabe Kwe and Dao, Shawanaga Donjaba, Binwa, Shawanaga de Bendagwas, Georgian Bay, Minogami, Biosphere and Donji, Minwa, Sherrill Judge, Yaganashi, No Swin. I'm going to translate all of that, but also just want to acknowledge and say miigwech to Greg and Aaron for the introductions and the land acknowledgement as people continue to learn what our responsibilities are as those that are from the land, as well as those that are settling and as newcomers to this land, what those responsibilities are. So miigwech. So introductions. I'm going to share a little bit about when we introduce ourselves as Anishinaabe and the ways that we connect to each other. So I've shared my spirit name. My spirit name translates to Sounding Earth. I've had that name since I was about 12 years old, so I've carried that for some time, and I still continue to grow into my name to this day. Sherrill Judge is my English name, my given name. You can call me Sherrill. Miigwech Aaron for saying Midway Kamagagokwe and taking the time to get to know and say that very comfortably. So miigwech for that. I am from the Fish Clan. Specifically, I am Sturgeon Clan. I am Anishinaabe Kwe from Shawanaga First Nation, born and bred, and so that's been my home for my lifetime. I have been with the Georgian Bay Minogami Biosphere as the Maawaanji'iwe manager for the last 4 years. And really what Maawaanji'iwe talks about is life renewal in the ways that we connect to the land and spirit and water and relations within that. Miigwech, Katrina?
Almost forgot to unmute myself. Almost. Miigwech Sherrill. Katrina Krievins and Dijnikas, Katakenzi and Dodom, Mississauga and Donjaba, Seguin and Dot, Latvian, Canadian and Dow, Georgian Bay, Minogami, Biosphere, and Donja Aniki. My name is Katrina Krievins. I'm the Aquatic Conservation Programs Manager with GBB. And as Aaron mentioned, I've been with the Biosphere since 2016, and a large part of my role has been with the State of the Bay program, which makes it extra special to be sharing this program area with you today. So I'm sure many of you in the room are familiar with GBB, but just in case there's anybody who's wondering, what is this GBB business we're talking about? The entire eastern coast of Georgian Bay was designated in 2004 as a UNESCO World Biosphere region. And what that really means is that it's recognition of the fact that the eastern coast of Georgian Bay is ecologically significant in the world. We're home to the 30,000 islands, or the world's largest freshwater archipelago, largest collection of freshwater islands. And it's that really unique sort of landscape that makes this a special place. We have really diverse habitats and species and diverse communities too. The Biosphere region lies within the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. And you can see the communities on this map that are throughout the region beyond the Biosphere as well. And it's important to mention these treaties as a reminder that we are all treaty people, as whether we're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. These treaties apply to everybody. We have responsibilities to the lands and the waters in this region, and we have responsibilities to each other. I consider it a privilege to live in this beautiful part of the world, and I'm grateful to the Indigenous communities who have been here since time immemorial and have been caring for this place since time immemorial. In addition to that landscape designation, the Georgian Bay Minogami Biosphere is also a dynamic and growing charitable organization. We're based here in Parry Sound, but our work takes us up and down the coast from the outer islands all the way inland. And despite having those boundaries, we also work beyond those boundaries. With Muskoka Watershed Council, for example, the State of the Bay program has received a lot of input and great advice from the Muskoka Watershed Council over the years, and we've learned from each other as we've done this. But generally speaking, GBB has a very broad mandate from UNESCO, and we sum it up by saying it's all about caring for people and place. And as you can see from the photos here on the slide, that broad mandate translates into a wide range of work. We we do a lot. There's not a lot that we don't have our fingers in, but it really comes back to the partnerships and the relationships with the communities and the people up and down the coast. There's not really much that the Biosphere does without partnerships. Pretty much everything is working with others and trying to work collaboratively on the coast for better results, quite frankly. And the program area that we're going to focus on today is absolutely no different. We have tons of partners involved in this, and it's the State of the Bay program. I'll share a little bit about the history of the program and how we got to where we are today. And in order to do that, we're going to start with a little bit of context. So, despite the fact that the Great Lakes are described as the heart of Turtle Island, they provide clean water for all of creation. Despite this, these lakes have undergone immense changes since colonization. I'm sure this is not news to the folks in the room, but the settlement of this region, the coast, but also further inland to covering Muskoka, the settlement of this region by Europeans changed the landscape dramatically, and those changes included some very negative impacts on both the Indigenous peoples who are already living here, as well as the native flora and fauna in the region. It's no surprise that the area saw timber extraction, very extensive fish harvest, crude oil storage, coal smelters, introduction of non-native species, and much, much more. And what this has left us with, unfortunately, is a destabilized ecosystem. It's one that wouldn't be recognizable to those who lived and fished here 200 years ago. So although Georgian Bay and surrounding area might still feel like wilderness, we do face virtually all of the same pressures as the other Great Lakes when it comes to things like human development, invasive species, and climate change. And while we certainly appear to be in better shape than the lower Great Lakes, we face a lot of similar threats and stressors as well. And you can see from that map on the screen that certainly we don't likely face quite as much in the way of cumulative stress as you see in Ontario and Erie, but we're not without our own challenges. And the reports here on the screen, the State of the Great Lakes, Lake Huron-Lamp, these are really great resources that speak to how these pressures are changing the health of Lake Huron and the other lakes. But at a more local level, we wanted to know what's happening in Georgian Bay and specifically what's happening in Eastern Georgian Bay. I'm sure many of you are familiar that Lake Huron is actually made up of 3 distinct basins. You've got the main basin, the North Channel, and Georgian Bay, and each is really quite unique. They have their own unique ecosystem dynamics, and so when we summarize overall health of Lake Huron, it doesn't really get at some of the nuances or the unique aspects of those different basins. So the State of the Bay program was created in response to this need to take a more local level approach as much as possible. And back in about 2008, these conversations started with a number of partners about wanting to have this more local level assessment. So with the help of dozens of partners, indicators of ecosystem health were selected, and then from there, GBB began gathering information, summarizing it, and eventually reporting it out to the public. And now that we're well into the State of the Bay program, a new report is released every 5 years, essentially trying to get an answer to the question, are things getting better, getting worse, or staying the same? And in order to answer this question, we look at a number of different indicators or measures of the health of the environment. And these indicators have sort of shifted over time from the initial 2013 report, as has the way that we've reported on them. We did used to use a bit like a grading system. Now we're really looking more at trends, and our sources of data for some of these indicators have changed along the way, as I know Muskoka Watershed Council is also familiar with. We learn as we go, and yeah, so things have kind of changed. But some of the examples of the indicators that we're looking at are things like fish communities, including walleye that you see there, the lower food web. We look at climate change indicators like ice cover and water temperature and many others. And historically, we've largely relied on Western science for this. We've pumped out these graphs and charts and things that you see on the screen, and these are great sources of information, and they're good ways of communicating information, but they're not the only sources of information, and it's not the only way to present ideas and perspectives um, and ways of noting change over time. So in the past, we also included some partner profiles, like you see here on the screen, to highlight work that might fall outside that realm of Western science. But we knew there was more that we could do, and we knew that there was more that we should be doing. So for State of the Bay 2023, we took a new approach, and this new approach is one that draws on Western and Indigenous science, worldview, and values. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, integrating worldviews has been called weaving or braiding knowledge. It's often taught as two-eyed seeing by Elder Albert Marshall. I'm sure folks are very familiar with that. In Anishinaabe-Moan, the language of Minnedogamie or Georgian Bay, a similar concept has been shared as seeing both sides. And this was shared to us by Dr. Brian McInnes of Wasauksing First Nation. Sherrill, I'm saying the words in my head because Sherrill is helping me learn how to say the word that you see at the top of the screen here that that means seeing both sides. I'm not going to try it on this call right now. I need to say it to myself a few more times, but I promise I'll get there. So historically, GBB has privileged Western science, Western knowledge and approaches in our work, and there's no two ways about it. We have, and we acknowledge that, and now we're working to change that. And so the State of the Bay program is one area where we are working to change the knowledge systems that we lift up and bring forward. And with the State of the Bay program, we have been doing this with the support and the guidance of the Biosphere's Cultural Advisory Circle, the Georgian Bay Anishinaabe Youth, a number of really, really great advisors, language speakers, for example, Dr. Brian McInnes, who I just mentioned, and really folks, anyone who was willing to share their stories and perspectives with us. So we are very, very grateful to everybody who's given their time and their knowledge, who's shared with us. I think it's fair to say that the latest State of the Bay magazine has really, really benefited from that, and it just simply wouldn't be possible with all those folks contributing and providing their time and their expertise. Hopefully some of you are familiar with this beautiful piece of art. This is the artwork that's found at the centerfold of the latest State of the Bay magazine. It was created by Maawaanji'iwe, as you can see in the bottom corner there, an artist from Maawaanji'iwe First Nation. We're going to chat a bit about some of the themes in State of the Bay and give some different perspectives on those, but we wanted to start by bringing up this beautiful piece, and I'll hand it over to Sherrill at this point.
Miigwech, Miigwech, Katrina. So just quickly, I'll go over that word and want to put two and two together with what Greg had talked about in the land acknowledgement. It's important when you're giving a land acknowledgement, yes, they're not a bunch of words. It's your connection to those words and to the people, the land, and the language. And so this two-eyed seeing perspective that was shared by Albert Marshall, it's important for us to begin to realize that the people in this place, in this part of the land, also have a word, and that's the word that was shared to us by Dr. Brian McGinnis. And the way to say that is Edwe Wab Nada Mang. Edwe Wab Nada Mang. And that's really being able to see with a wider lens. You're looking at more than just what's in front of you. And so that's one of the beautiful things about Anishinaabe and the Ojibwe language, is that it has so many different perspectives and inclusive of so many different things. It gives life to so many different words. And so I'll share a little bit of that throughout our presentation. So as Katrina shared, this is our centerfold, and it is beautiful to look at. There's not a lot that I need to say to recognize how beautiful it is. But when we started to look at this edition of State of the Bay, it was really beginning to understand that there are multiple ways of knowing, and acknowledging that all ways of knowledge are true, and all ways of knowledge should be shared and known. And so we wanted to have that perspective. We wanted to be able to share that. We wanted to really look at the way that this edition was going to be shared. And so we sat down with our cultural advisory committee, and we began to map out what that was going to look like. And it's hard to believe. I remember the first time we sat down and looked at what that could look like, and here we are today. This is a bit of what we had projected and thought about for this vision of this edition. And so I had a conversation with Mashika and Kwe, and I talked about the journey that the Biosphere has been on. A lot of our colleagues and those that are on our cultural advisory committee, our board, and so we wanted to reflect that. And a lot of that work actually began with, and I'm going to share some resources throughout, because I always like to share resources and share what I know, where I'm learning from, and also so that others can continue to learn and encourage you to continue to learn. So when we started to learn, and I would have to say, really give credit to Becky and Greg for being true allies and wanting to change the way that things were done, not only within the Biosphere, but themselves personally within their families. And so when they recognized that, it was looking at the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, so UNDRIP. So this is one of the books that I carry frequently in my bag, and it talks about all the different ways that the articles support Indigenous people. And from that came the Truth and Reconciliation, so the 94 Calls to Action. This handy little book I have as well, and I like to call upon organizations, institutions that I'm working with. Where are you in your steps to reconciliation in those 94 calls to action? Another one I like to use is treaty words. And so it's beginning to, as we had talked about, we are all treaty people. And what is our responsibility? What is my responsibility as Anishinaabe Kwe and being from this land, but also those settlers and newcomers? And so this is an excellent book to start to understand treaty a little more within family context, but also if you're a new learner, this is a great little book to have as well. Another one that I like to share is 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act, and it really talks about the harms that the Indian Act had created to assimilate First Nations people. And it's a quick read. It's a really good read. And it talks about some of the things that were designed to assimilate the Indigenous people of this land. But it's a really good resource to be able to speak to and to think about the ways that we can make change today. So yeah, thinking about these things really put us on a path to reconciliation and thinking about what we could do. So when I spoke to Muskoka and we were looking at ways that we could do this, and really looking at the centerfold with a blank slate, and it was the medicine wheel that really guided us, and we were able to talk about all of the different components that the medicine wheel gives to us in knowing and learning and sharing. And so, what's reflected here, we see the four directions, the four seasons. Um, what else is not reflected here, but it's the four stages of life. Every color of human is represented, and so all of those things continue to show that we're all interconnected and that we all belong. And so, sharing that with Mashikekwe, this is what she had shared with us, and it's just it's so stunning to look at, and every time I see it, there's just such a deep connection to all of those things, and makes me very proud to be Anishinaabe, and that Mashikekwe could assist us with this beautiful piece of work. Next slide. So normally it would be frosty and we might even have some snow. However, that's not the case. Through climate change, we're noticing the changes in how we celebrate seasons, and it's a bit different, and seeing that as a challenge. And so for storytelling season, we wouldn't begin that as Anishinaabe until the first snowfall. So this also affects us as well in how stories are shared, because it hasn't snowed yet. And so it is a bit of a challenge. I'm still very creative in the ways that I can share, but it is something to definitely think about, because those things that govern how we carry out our work are also being impacted by that. So a couple of books that I would like to share for storytelling. These photos here are actually were commissioned by Gista Kennedy from Chimnasing. And I had approached Gista and asked if he could create some graphics for the recreation story, which is the Great Flood. And so you can actually learn more about the Great Flood in the Mishomis book by Edward Benton Benaybun. And it talks about all of our creation story within the book, and so much more. So that's one of them there. Another one that I like to share from is The Trail of Nanabojo. And this one is written by Isaac Murdoch, who is a fantastic storyteller. And I like to share those as well. So there's a couple for your winter reading for some storytelling and understanding about Anishinaabe worldview. Miigwech, next one. So the Nibe song, actually what I wanted to mention is that when we're talking about the theme of water, as Anishinaabe, we know that water is life. And for all of us that are human, in part of creation, we rely on water to sustain us. And so when we think about the water, how are we connected to that water? And just as I live on Minitogami and you guys live down at the other end of the bay, and how we all are deeply connected to water. And now we can even see that how sick the water is. But it's also important for us to, when we're connecting to the water, lifting up the water, and really celebrating and thanking life for thanking the water for all the life that it gives to us. And so what I wanted to share about that is this beautiful song that was written by Doreen Day. And I like to kid because I'm water clan, I'm a fish. Fish don't sing. So I won't sing this song for you, but I have written the words here to share with you. And you can actually look for this song on YouTube. Doreen does go into how this song was created. Doreen was at a water symposium, and Dr. Emoto had talked about the water and how water is sick. And so it was starting to think about the ways that they could share a beautiful lullaby to talk about the importance of water and how much that we appreciate and love water. And so it's Nibi I automatically want to go into singing it, but I'm not going to sing it for you. So Nibi Gazage Ego, Gimi Gwech We Nimi Go, Gija We Nimi Go. And so that's saying, water, we love you, we thank you, and we respect you. And to me, as I said, it's a lullaby, and it's sung without any drums. It's sung without any shakers. It's just a beautiful lullaby that you sing 4 times through. And so you can sing that to your water. You can sing that when you're at the water. And I also like to sing it with my grandson. This is a photo of my grandson, Nawatan. He's 18 months, and we are at the water on the homelands of my partner in Wissahickon. And so, again, it is my responsibility as a grandmother, as a life giver, to continue to share and lift up knowledge, and my responsibility to be a caregiver for water and for life. And so, getting a chance to think about that with my grandson is even more important. Miigwech, next slide. So in my introduction, I talked a bit about where I was from, and I would say Ndonjaba, and that talks about the place that I am from. A word that was shared to me, and I am a language learner. I have to work extra hard to learn my language because we don't have any fluent speakers left in my community. So I'm working a little bit harder to learn from different places, and thankfully we have Zoom and other things that were introduced to us through COVID, and beginning to learn my language a little bit more. And so one of the words that was shared to me by one of my mentors and teachers, Bernice Trudeau, was Debendagwes. And Debendagwes talks about the place that your heart belongs to. And so if we can all think about the place that our heart belongs to, and I'm sure many of us, it belongs to a place that's close to the water. And so for me, wanting to capture these photos here and share them with you were places that are close to my heart. In climate change, we're seeing that many places aren't getting as much ice, or if any ice at all. And so this is a great example of that. Last winter, my family, we do like to ice fish, and we had only been out 1 time last year. And so that first photograph would normally be covered in ice, and it would be snow covered, and not a big deal, but it's concerning for us. We're noticing that too, and it's affecting our way of life as well. The second photo is on Georgian Bay, so Minitogami, just down from Shawanaga Landing. And this is where I paddle quite often every night when I get the chance. And it's a beautiful place. The last photo there is a photo of me and my grandson on the shores at Shawanaga Landing. I walked these shores with my parents and my grandmother for a very long time, and so being able to do that with my grandson is just such a beautiful gift, and I want to ensure I can continue to do that for generations coming behind me. So lastly, I just wanted to say that that word Debendagwes, and where does your heart belong to? Where is your heart call home? And how important that is for all of us as we think about the water quality and how much we enjoy this beautiful place. Miigwech.
You good, Sherrill? It's always hard to follow you speaking. Such beautiful words, and now we're going to talk about phosphorus. So yeah, we wanted to continue talking about water and water quality. And I know this is a topic that is not new to the folks in the room, so I'm not gonna belabor these points for too long. But I did want to say that when we talk about water quality specifically in State of the Bay, we focus on total phosphorus. Of course, as you all know, phosphorus is that limiting nutrient in aquatic systems. Its presence controls how much growth, how productive the system is. And so again, I know this isn't new information to you, so I'm not gonna stick on here too long, but obviously folks know that we're sort of looking for that happy medium when it comes to nutrients. We don't want too few, and we don't for a sort of starved system, and we don't want too many nutrients where we get harmful algal blooms. In Georgian Bay, phosphorus, if we were to ask how are we doing, it really depends where you're looking, where you're talking about. So if we're talking about the offshore, it's a very different story compared to the near shore. And we typically try to get across this idea of an offshore near shore gradient. So as I'm sure probably most of you know, the offshore, deep offshore waters of Georgian Bay have naturally been low historically, and nearshore areas have naturally had higher nutrients, with nutrients coming in from the watershed. But starting in the 1990s, the offshore phosphorus levels decreased quite significantly and have remained low. So things have sort of leveled out since around 2016. And we've gone from around that dashed line on the chart that shows the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement objective of 5 micrograms per liter. We've gone down to about 2 micrograms per liter. And obviously, that's a huge difference, and that's really a huge problem for the offshore waters. Some folks describe the offshore waters as a bit of a biological desert, simply just not having enough nutrients to support a healthy food web. And then the map on the right shows MECP nearshore monitoring locations. And there you see phosphorus levels that are a bit higher and are able to still support quite diverse, healthy food webs in those nearshore areas. So why did this happen? Why did we see this big decline in offshore phosphorus? There's a number of reasons, and we certainly don't have the time to get into all of them. I think I heard that this meeting has to wrap up by about 3, so I'm certainly not going to get into all the reasons with that in mind. But one of the big contributing factors are zebra and quagga mussels, and really at this point it's more the quagga mussels. So the image here on the screen shows the invasion of zebra mussels to start, and then where quagga mussels really started to take over. When you look at that image of 2003, 2007, darker colors mean greater density. So you can see that quagga mussels really took off, and they spread so much more than the zebra mussels did because they're able to invade deeper parts of the Great Lakes. And at this point, they really carpet the entire offshore waters. Nearshore waters in Eastern Georgian Bay aren't quite as bad, just simply because the calcium levels don't really support the growth to that extent of zebra and quagga mussels in the nearshore areas. You'll still see some, but it's not the way it is out in the deeper offshore waters where the calcium levels are higher. And I'm sure folks are familiar with this, but the reason this invasion is so troubling, I mean, we've already said it's linked to the loss of phosphorus, but these mussels are filter feeders. They're pulling nutrients and algae out of the water, and that means that it's not available for the other organisms in the water. So the image on the left here shows 2 containers of water that were taken from the same water body. Mussels were placed into one of those containers and not in the other. After 10 minutes, you can see that there's been a little bit of settling of that water, so both are already clearer than they were 10 minutes ago, but the one with the mussels is significantly clearer, and that's because those mussels are pulling the nutrients and the algae and the little bits of things floating around in the water, they're pulling that out. And clear water, certainly beautiful, but when your water is too clear, it often means that it's devoid of other life. And that's kind of what's happening in the offshore waters. The photo on the right is from Inspired Planet Productions, and I'll just on the next slide, I'll mention an amazing documentary that you might already be aware of, but I'll transition into that. Why don't I just talk about so if you haven't heard of All Too Clear, it's a 3-part documentary series by Inspired Planet Productions. They're the same folks who made the Striking Balance series, if you had seen that on Biosphere regions across Canada. Great, talented folks, and they made this fantastic documentary that really drives home the message of how much impact zebra and quagga mussels have had on the Great Lakes and the ripple effects up the food web, how that affects the lower food web and how that then affects fish and livelihoods that are associated with fish and relationships that people have with that ecosystem that have changed drastically. So you can stream all 3 of these episodes. Georgian Bay features most heavily in the 3rd episode, so it's obviously the best one. But it's a really, really great way to understand, like really understand how these changes have happened and what it means for the ecosystem and the people who live around the Great Lakes. So yeah, shout out for that awesome documentary. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to take a moment to say, Jimmy Gwitch, big thanks to everybody who's been involved with the State of the Bay, both on the biosphere side of things, but all of our partners as well, and including the individuals who don't have their names listed here. But State of the Bay is a huge partnership, and it's absolutely not possible. It would not come together without the contributions of all these folks. Muskoka Watershed Council being a strong part of that as well. And just to wrap it up here, feel free to follow us on our social media. You can sign up for our newsletter if you want to hear about events and things that are going on. And if there are future opportunities to collaborate, to attend events, that sort of thing, please don't hesitate to reach out. Miigwech.